Hey, everybody, and welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at what it's like to be newly diagnosed with CRPS.
Complex regional pain syndrome.
Yeah, you got complex regional pain syndrome.
It's a mouthful.
It is. And, it's one of those things where,
Yeah.
you can imagine going from doctor to doctor with this unexplained pain
Yeah,
and then finally getting a diagnosis that brings more questions than answers.
absolutely. And that's what we're going to be diving into today.
Exactly. And to help me unpack all of this, I've got a wonderful expert here with me today.
Hello.
So maybe you could start off by just giving us a little bit of a baseline understanding of CRPS,
Sure. So, complex regional pain syndrome is a rare condition.
Oh, yeah.
Only about 26 out of 100,000 people are diagnosed each year.
Wow.
And it's a condition where your nervous system basically is sending pain signals that are out of proportion to any injury or event that may have occurred.
So you're telling me someone could stub their toe, and instead of that normal fleeting pain, they end up with this chronic, burning, almost electric shock-like pain.
Pretty accurate way to put it. Yeah. And it's not always triggered by an injury either.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes there's no clear cause at all.
So then how do you even begin to diagnose something like that?
It's really based on the symptoms
Oh,
and eliminating other possibilities.
right. So you're going through and ruling everything else out.
It's a process of elimination. And even then, sometimes it takes quite a while.
I bet. I mean, if it's so rare,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
you're not going to see that every day as a doctor.
And the source we're looking at today really emphasizes the shock and the fear that come with that initial diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine hearing you have CRPS,
Yeah,
this rare condition that you've probably never heard of.
right.
And then on top of that, you're told that it could last weeks, months, even years.
I would just be like, what do we do now?
Yeah.
Where do I even go from here?
The first thing that most people do is they go online.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
They try to make sense of this information.
You go right to Google.
You go right to Google, and as the source calls it, you're essentially Googling the monster.
I love that, Googling the monster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you start encountering terms like, the most painful condition,
Mm.
chronic, no cure. It's
Yeah.
not exactly reassuring.
Not when you're already feeling vulnerable.
Right.
So is there any reason for hope, or is it really as bleak as those initial search results might suggest?
There's absolutely reason for hope.
Okay, good.
A lot of readily available information can be pretty scary,
Right.
but it doesn't represent the whole picture.
Okay.
The important thing to remember is that there's no one-size-fits-all cure for CRPS,
Right.
but there's a ton of research and advancements,
Mm-hmm.
and there are ways to manage symptoms
Okay.
and live a fulfilling life.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
So then, what does that initial medical journey typically look like, after a CRPS diagnosis? What are some of the first steps that doctors might take?
Well, first, it's important to understand that the source we're referencing highlights a big problem, and that is that 81% of people with CRPS
Wow.
felt they weren't given enough information at diagnosis.
That's a really high number.
It is, yeah. And that just makes advocating for yourself
Yeah.
and seeking out specialists all the more important.
Yeah.
So,
Like you really have to,
You have to.
be your own advocate.
yeah, you really do.
And you know what? It's
Mhm.
probably scary enough going through all of this,
Right.
but then to feel like you're not even getting the information that you need.
It adds another layer of difficulty to the whole process.
Exactly. So what do you do?
So in terms of treatment, early intervention is key.
Okay.
Doctors might start with nerve blocks to try and interrupt those pain signals.
Okay, so they're trying to stop the pain right from the get-go.
Exactly. They're trying to manage that pain as best they can. They may also recommend physical therapy to maintain mobility
Right.
in the affected limb.
Yeah, you don't want to just stop using it
Absolutely.
because then that can cause problems too.
it can cause further complications.
Right.
And then they might also prescribe medications to manage the pain.
Okay.
But the challenge with CRPS is that what works for one person
Right.
might not work for another.
Yeah.
So finding the right treatment plan can often involve a bit of trial and error.
I can only imagine how frustrating that must be.
It's one of the toughest aspects of navigating a CRPS diagnosis.
So on top of it all, you have to go through all this trial and error.
Exactly. And this is where the emotional component really comes into play.
All right.
The source talks about the profound sense of isolation that many
Yeah.
people feel.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is CRPS rare, making
Yeah.
it hard to find others who understand,
Right.
but the nature of the pain itself can be very difficult to explain to loved ones. It's like trying to describe a color they've never seen before.
You can't explain it.
It's very difficult.
So how do people cope with that feeling of isolation?
Right.
Where can they turn for support?
That's where connecting with others who have CRPS can be life-changing.
Okay.
Support groups, whether online or in person,
Right.
offer a space to share experiences, coping strategies, and just to feel understood.
Yeah, just knowing that you're not alone.
Exactly.
I imagine that makes a huge difference.
It does, and advocacy organizations can also be really helpful.
Like what can they offer?
They can provide resources.
Okay.
They can connect patients with specialists,
Mm.
and they can raise awareness about CRPS.
And that's so important with a rare disease.
Absolutely.
I mean, you really need people out there,
To spread the word.
fighting for it.
Right. So
So it sounds like
finding that community can make a world of difference.
it does. It makes you feel less alone and more empowered.
And that sense of empowerment is crucial.
Okay.
It's about moving from that initial fear and shock
Right.
towards taking an active role in managing your condition and your life.
Okay, so let's dive into that empowerment piece in more detail in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
What are some concrete steps people can take to regain a sense of control after a CRPS diagnosis?
We'll get into all that.
We'll unpack all of that when we return. Welcome back to our deep dive into the CRPS diagnosis experience. So far, we've talked about the initial shock, the frantic search for information, and that overwhelming sense of isolation. Now, let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about that long-term journey. What does it actually look like to live with CRPS day in and day out?
It's a question I'm sure weighs heavily on anyone newly diagnosed. And
Yeah.
honestly, there's no easy answer.
Right.
One of the biggest challenges that the source highlights is the unpredictable nature of the pain.
Okay.
It can fluctuate dramatically, which makes it really difficult to plan or commit to things. Yeah. Or just feel any sense of normalcy.
So are you constantly on edge? Like you never know when that next flare-up is going to hit?
That's exactly it. You might be having a good day feeling relatively pain-free,
Mm-hmm.
and then suddenly out of nowhere,
Damn.
you're hit with this intense wave of pain.
Wow.
It can be really disheartening, and it often leads to a lot of anxiety and stress,
Right.
which unfortunately can make the pain even worse.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it really is.
I imagine it makes even simple tasks, the things that most people take for granted, feel really daunting.
Absolutely. Something as basic as going to the grocery store or meeting a friend for coffee
Right.
can become a major hurdle.
Yeah.
And that's where this concept of pacing comes in,
Okay.
which the source touched on earlier.
Can you explain pacing a little bit more? I think for those listening who might be new to this,
Yeah.
it might sound a little counterintuitive. Like, why would you limit yourself when you're already dealing with these limitations?
It's a great question. Pacing isn't about stopping activity altogether. It's about learning to manage your energy level strategically so you can do the things that are important to you
Right.
without triggering or worsening those pain flares.
Yeah.
Think of it like budgeting your energy instead of your money.
I like that. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So instead of pushing through the pain and trying to do everything you used to, it's about being mindful of your limits and finding that kind of sustainable pace.
Precisely. It takes a lot of self-awareness and discipline,
Right.
but it can be a real game changer in terms of managing your symptoms and maintaining some semblance of control over your life.
What are some specific examples of pacing techniques? Like, what does that actually look like in practice?
It's going to be different for everyone, but
Yeah.
there are some common strategies.
Okay.
For instance, you might find it helpful to break down tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Okay.
So instead of trying to clean the entire house in one go,
Right.
maybe you focus on one room a day,
Right.
or even just one task like doing the dishes.
That makes sense. It's about, being realistic about what you can actually handle
Right.
without pushing yourself too far.
Exactly. Another helpful technique is to schedule regular rest periods throughout the day.
Okay.
Even if you're not feeling particularly tired,
Okay.
this gives your body a chance to recharge and can help prevent those energy crashes that often lead to pain flares.
So you're essentially like building in those buffers to protect yourself
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
from overexertion.
And it's not just about physical rest either.
Oh, okay.
Mental and emotional rest are just as important.
Right, because,
Absolutely.
this is taking a toll, I imagine, on your,
Your whole being.
your whole being. Yeah.
So this might involve incorporating mindfulness practices like meditation or deep breathing exercises, or simply taking some time to disconnect from technology and engage in activities that bring you joy.
So it's not just, sitting down and not doing anything. It's
No.
about actively, engaging in things that make you happy.
That nurture you.
Yeah. So pacing is as much about prioritizing self-care
Absolutely.
as it is about managing physical activity.
It's both. It really is.
But I can imagine that even with the best pacing strategies, CRPS can still take a toll on your social life, on your relationship.
Absolutely. That's something the source really emphasized as well.
Okay?
The unpredictable nature of the pain can make it difficult to make plans.
Right.
Or commit to social events.
You're always kind of that question mark,
You might have to cancel at the last minute.
Yeah.
Or you might find yourself feeling isolated because you're just not up for going out as much as you used to.
And then there's the challenge of explaining, this invisible illness to people who've never experienced it.
Absolutely. How do you
even begin to describe that?
It's hard for people to understand the intensity and complexity of the pain
Right.
when there are no outward signs of injury or illness.
Right. They just think you're fine.
Right.
And you should be able to do all the things.
Right. And it can lead to misunderstandings, frustration,
Yeah.
and even feelings of judgment from friends and family who might think you're exaggerating or being overly dramatic.
It sounds like a recipe for a lot of, hurt feelings on both sides.
It definitely can be, and that's why open and honest communication is so crucial.
So how do you even begin to have that conversation?
Well, educating your loved ones about CRPS.
Okay.
Maybe by sharing resources from reputable organizations or explaining how the pain affects you personally can help bridge that gap in understanding.
So knowledge is power in this situation.
It really is.
And I imagine it's also about setting boundaries and learning to say no when you need to.
Absolutely. You have the right to prioritize your health and well-being, and that sometimes means saying no to social events or activities that you know will be too much for you.
Even if it's hard to say no.
Even if it's difficult, yeah.
So it's about finding that balance between, maintaining your social connections,
Right, yeah.
but also honoring your limits.
Exactly. It's not always easy, but it's an important part of learning to live well with CRPS. And remember, the people who truly care about you will understand and support you.
Okay.
Even if they don't fully grasp what you're going through.
And, and finding that understanding and support within the CRPS community, I imagine is really powerful too.
It can be a lifeline. Connecting with others who truly get it, who have walked in your shoes, can offer a level of validation and comfort that's hard to find elsewhere. They can share practical advice, coping strategies, and most importantly, a sense of shared experience that can help combat that feeling of isolation.
It's about, finding your tribe, a community where you feel seen and heard and understood.
That's beautifully put.
And that sense of connection can be incredibly healing. Especially when you're facing, those emotional and mental health challenges that often accompany a chronic pain condition like CRPS.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about that aspect a little bit more in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
How does living with chronic pain impact your mental health?
Yeah.
And what are some strategies for coping and building resilience?
Yeah.
We'll explore all of that and more when we return. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
In this final part of our, look into life with CRPS, we're moving into a space that I think is incredibly important, the realm of acceptance, advocacy, and finding hope, even when facing, this chronic pain.
It's a powerful shift.
Yeah.
And it's one that I've seen make a world of difference in the lives of so many people.
I think a lot of people, when they hear the word acceptance, they think it means giving up.
Right.
Or, resigning yourself to a fate that you don't want. But that's not what we're talking about here, is it?
Not at all. Acceptance in the context of chronic illness is about acknowledging the reality of your situation, embracing the limitations it might bring, and then figuring out how to move forward from there.
So it's not about giving up.
Yeah.
It's about, working with what you've got.
It's about making peace with the new normal, however different it might be from what you envisioned for yourself.
And I imagine that process of making peace isn't always easy.
Right.
Or linear.
It's a journey, often with twists and turns, ups and downs.
Yeah, it's not a straight line.
Oh, it's not.
So there's going to be good days and bad days.
Absolutely. There will be days filled with frustration, anger, grief. All of those emotions are valid.
Yeah.
But there will also be moments of triumph, resilience, and newfound strength.
So it's about finding those moments.
It is, and it's often in those moments that we see people shift from a passive patient role to becoming active advocates.
Okay, I like that.
For their own health and well-being.
So what does that look like?
Right.
How does someone with CRPS start advocating for themselves?
Oh. Advocacy can take many forms.
Okay.
It starts with educating yourself about CRPS,
Okay.
becoming your own expert,
Mhm.
learning to communicate effectively with your healthcare providers,
Right.
and knowing your rights as a patient.
Because you do have rights as a patient.
Yeah, absolutely do.
And sometimes those get overlooked.
They do, and that's why it's so important to be informed and to speak up for yourself.
So it's about asking questions,
Yeah,
seeking out second opinions if needed,
absolutely.
and pushing back when you feel like your needs aren't being met
Exactly.
because you are the one living in your body.
You know it best,
Yeah.
and you deserve to have your voice heard.
And I imagine it also involves advocating for the CRPS community as a whole, right?
Absolutely.
Like raising awareness,
Mhm.
pushing for more research,
Mm-hmm.
better treatments.
Yeah, you can share your story,
Okay.
connect with other patients,
Mm-hmm.
support advocacy organizations, and even participate in research studies if you're able.
So it's about turning, your pain into purpose
Exactly.
and using your experience to make a difference
It
to
is.
yourself and others facing similar challenges.
Absolutely. And that sense of purpose of being part of something bigger than yourself can be a powerful source of hope.
It's about, not letting this
Right.
define you,
Yeah.
but using it as a way to help others and
Yes,
to
grow.
grow.
Yeah.
And that hope isn't just a fleeting emotion.
Right.
It's something you have to actively cultivate.
It is. It's a choice you make every day
Yeah.
to focus on the good, to appreciate the small victories, and to find joy in the midst of difficulty.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the present moment, finding ways to connect with your passions, and
Yeah.
focusing on what you can control
Okay.
rather than what you can't.
So for anyone listening who might be newly diagnosed or who's still struggling to find their way,
Right.
what's the message you want to leave them with?
You're not alone.
Yeah.
There are resources available, communities ready to welcome you.
Mm-hmm.
And there is always, always reason to hope.
It's a new chapter,
Beautifully said.
not the final chapter. And on that note of hope and resilience, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of CRPS. We hope this exploration has provided some insights, sparked some reflection, and maybe even ignited a bit of hope for those who need it most. Remember, knowledge is power, connection is strength, and even amidst the challenges, there is always reason to keep moving forward.